Welcome back to why Matthew Stafford is a Super Bowl caliber quarterback. In the last episode, we talked about Stafford's supporting cast on the offensive side of the ball. Today, we will be talking about his supporting cast on the defensive side of the ball. In this first slide, I have pictures of Darius Slay, Ndamukong Suh, Ziggy Ansah, and Glover Quinn. These four guys are every Pro Bowler on the defensive side of the ball that Stafford has ever played with in his career. So let's see how it stacks up to some other Super Bowl winning quarterbacks, shall we? Here's every defensive Pro Bowler I could find in the careers of Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger, and Russell Wilson. And what do you know? Stafford's Pro Bowl supporting cast on defense pales in comparison to these four quarterbacks that I brought up. Stafford has had 4, but Tom Brady has had 18, Roethlisberger 14, Rodgers 9, and Wilson also 9. So here's Drew Brees' and Eli Manning's defensive Pro Bowl list. Look at Drew Brees, and please note I'm only talking about his time with the Saints. Even with all the terrible defenses that Drew Brees has played with, he has still had more Pro Bowlers on defense than Stafford. Eli Manning actually gained a little more of my respect after finding this list of defensive Pro Bowlers he's had because he's just a much better football player than he'll ever be given credit for. Stafford supporters like me are always trying to tell people that he needs more help. But you had Calvin Johnson and Ndamukong Suh, says Rob Parker. Yeah, but Calvin Johnson and Ndamukong Suh don't make an entire football team as we've already seen. So if we combine Stafford's offensive and defensive Pro Bowl supporting cast, that adds up to 7 total Pro Bowlers in 10 seasons. Every player on this list, except for Drew Brees, has had more Pro Bowlers on defense than Stafford has had total Pro Bowlers on offense and defense. Let that sink in, people. So does it ever occur to anyone that he really might need a little more talent around him? Not just on the offense, but on the defense too. I want to stay on Rob Parker's point for a second, because maybe he's on to something. Stafford had Calvin Johnson and Ndamukong Suh. He did have Glover Quinn, and he did have Darius Slay, but Darius Slay wasn't great until, recently. But anyways, so we had Calvin Johnson and Ndamukong Suh. Well, let me ask you this. Is it better to have Calvin Johnson and Ndamukong Suh, or to have Greg Jennings, Clay Matthews, Jordy Nelson, and Charles Woodson? Or is it maybe better to have Joey Porter, Willie Parker, Troy Polamalu, Casey Hampton, Jeff Hardings, and Alan Faneca? Or maybe even it might be better to have Rob Gronkowski, James Devlin, Stephon Gilmore, Devin McCourty, and Dante Hightower. I don't know about you guys, but I'd have to think 4 is greater than 2. So having a lot of Pro Bowlers isn't the end-all be-all to having a good defense. And I would think that's fair enough to agree with. So let's look at Stafford's scoring defenses throughout his career and how it compares to other quarterbacks. Keep in mind, on this list, I'm only counting the seasons that these quarterbacks started or that they played the majority of. So, for example, Stafford missed a bunch of games in the 2010 season, so I did not include that season on his list. But anyways, look, Stafford has had 4 top 16 scoring defenses in his career. That's less than half the seasons that he has played in. So, and what do you know? The times he did, the 2 out of the 4 times he did have a top 16 scoring defense, he made it to the playoffs. Yeah, but shouldn't he make it to the playoffs 4 out of 4 times with a top 16 scoring defense? Oh, well, we'll get to it. We'll get to that eventually in the series. Like, the 2013 season, Jim Schwartz. That's almost enough said. We'll eventually get to that more in the series, but Jim Schwartz is a big part of the reason why the Lions did not make the playoffs in one of those times. And the second time this year, Stafford lost almost every receiver that he had. He had almost no one to throw to except for Kenny Galladay, and Kenny Galladay is no Calvin Johnson. And also that the 2018 season, that defense did not start playing good until they got Snacks Harrison, and even then it still took them a second to start gelling. Anyways, so 4 top 16 scoring defenses. That's as much as Eli Manning, and it's only 1 more than Cam Newton. And Cam Newton has played 1 less season than Stafford has. We see that Stafford has not gotten nearly the defensive support as a huge chunk of the quarterbacks on this list. But Eli Manning is, I just want to say real fast, he's had to carry his team, and he's done a lot more in his career than he'll ever be given credit for. Here's how many bottom 16, bottom 10, and bottom 5 defenses that Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Cam Newton, Eli Manning, and Ben Roethlisberger have had in their careers. And what do you know? Stafford has had more bottom 16 defenses than all these quarterbacks except for Eli and Cam Newton. And he's had more bottom 10 defenses than everybody except for Eli. And you all wonder why he hasn't won like pretty much everybody else. And on top of having minimal defensive help, he's had virtually no running game. No defense, no running game. But get rid of Stafford! Trade him! He's mediocre! Now, I like most of these players, but if Roethlisberger, Newton, Manning, or Wilson in particular were playing with Stafford's lack of a supporting cast throughout their careers, then they'd be mediocre too. And I'm going to prove it with historical evidence very shortly. But I want to just let you all know what these guys' records were when they had these bottom 16 defenses. I want to start off by talking about Aaron Rodgers and Ben Roethlisberger's records first, because these two finished pretty solidly above 500, despite having a bottom 16 defense. Aaron Rodgers, in the seasons that he played with bottom 16 scoring defenses, excluding his injured seasons, finished 36-26-1. And Roethlisberger in his lone season with a bottom 16 defense finished 11-5. So why can't Stafford be more like these two and literally carry the team all the way? Well, they didn't. Aaron Rodgers and Ben Roethlisberger did not carry the team all the way. Rodgers' record is inflated by the 2011 season in which the Packers finished 15-1, and Rodgers finished 14-1 because he sat the last game. And his receiving core that year was so good, as I've stated during the series, that the backup quarterback was able to come in and throw for 480 yards and 6 touchdowns. So it took having the best receiving core in the NFL just to overcome his less than stellar defense that year. Now that I've explained why it was possible for him to have such an amazing record, I would have to think it must be taken out because it is an outlier. If we take out Rodgers' 2011 season, his record falls to 22-25-1. Whether you think it's fair for me to take that season out is for you to decide. But the bottom line is that it took having an absolutely loaded offense just to overcome a below-average defense. And the same with Ben Roethlisberger's 11-5 season in 2014. It took an absolutely loaded offense just to overcome the below-average defense. Roethlisberger had Heath Miller, Le'Veon Bell, and Antonio Brown as some of his top targets. Heath Miller was not a Pro Bowler in 2014, but he was still very productive. But believe me, we're going to see instances in which Roethlisberger was struggling to win. So I guess the real question is, why can't Stafford be like Tom Brady? He had no running game or defenses in those 2 seasons in which his defenses finished bottom 16. Well, here's my answer. Nobody's Tom Brady. Aaron Rodgers isn't even Tom Brady. No one's Tom Brady. So that should just end the discussion right there. But the 3 ones I want to talk about the most are Cam Newton, Eli Manning, and Russell Wilson. Look how much Cam Newton struggled to win when he had a bottom 16 defense. And same with Eli Manning. He only had a 72-88 record. Now, I put Wilson in here because he's never had a bottom 16 scoring defense in his career. The worst defense he's ever had in his career was the 13th ranked scoring defense. He only led them to 9-7. Just imagine if that defense was bottom 16. It would have been a worse record. So I listed 4 quarterbacks that I said would be mediocre if they were playing with Stafford's lack of a supporting cast throughout their careers. And I said I would prove it with historical evidence. But is it possible to prove I'm right? I mean, every one of these quarterbacks comes from different schemes, different systems, different philosophies, different coaching, different supporting casts, so it's almost impossible to compare situations. Well, I'm going to do my best. We're going to get these situations as close to the same as we possibly can. But I want a reference point. So here's Stafford's 2011 season, and a little bit of what he had to work with. You got Calvin Johnson as his lone Pro Bowler, the 29th ranked rushing attack, and the 23rd ranked scoring defense. So let's find some similar situations so we can see how other quarterbacks would have performed in that situation. Here's 5 similar situations that I decided to use. Please note that I placed a plus sign next to the seasons in which the rankings actually ranked higher than the Lions' rankings in 2011. For example, the Lions had the 23rd ranked scoring defense in 2011, but the Steelers in the 2013 season had the 14th ranked scoring defense. It ranked higher than the 23rd, so I placed a plus sign next to it. So please look especially hard at Russell Wilson's 2017 season and Ben Roethlisberger's 2013 season. I want you to pay attention to those two seasons in particular because the Lions finished with a better record than the Steelers and Seahawks did in those particular seasons. But notice how the Steelers and Seahawks had a higher ranked running game and defense, and they also had more Pro Bowlers on the team. So Stafford led his team to a better record despite less help pretty much all the way across the board. These two seasons show that if Roethlisberger or Wilson won the Lions, almost nothing would change, and there's actually a chance that the Lions would be struggling even more. But even look at Tom Brady's 2005 season. Stafford led the Lions to the same record in 2011 that Tom Brady led the Patriots to in 2005, despite a worse scoring defense and a worse running game. And look at Cam Newton leading the Panthers to 7-8-1 with a bad defense but the 7th-ranked running game. Stafford led the Lions to a better record despite having less help across the board. Of the quarterbacks I've brought up, I don't see how they would be able to be successful if they were in Stafford's situation. Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady might be able to, but in these examples that I've used for Roethlisberger, Newton, and Wilson, there's no way they would. So now I want to talk about Stafford's 2014 season. This is the best record he ever got the Lions to, was 11-5. And the 2014 season is probably the most complete team that Stafford has ever had. But there was still a big black hole in the running game. Stafford had 4 Pro Bowlers on the team in 2014. That defense was mostly suffocating that season as they ranked 3rd in scoring. Stafford was put out in the first round against the Cowboys that year, but they did finish 11-5, which is nothing to sniff at. This season proves that if you give Stafford a top 5 defense, he'll 100% win games. But there was still a black hole in the running game. Just imagine how good the Lions would have been if they had a running game to complement that defense. And that record should be better because the Lions lost at least 1 game, maybe even 2, because our field goal kicking in the first 5 games was absolutely miserable. At the very least, they should have beaten the Bills in Week 5, but too bad for them. They were 0 for 3 on field goals in that game, a game that was decided by 3 points. But 11-5 nonetheless, all 3 phases, and they missed that 3rd phase in the first 5 games. But 11-5. So anyways, let's see how other quarterbacks would do if they had a good defense but no running game to complement it. Or vice versa. How would they do if they had a good running game but no defense to complement it? Just how would other quarterbacks perform if they had a black hole on the team? Here's some examples I could find of quarterbacks playing with a black hole on the team with the defense or the running game. I used a plus sign to indicate that the ranking was higher than Stafford's, and I used a minus sign to indicate that the ranking was lower than Stafford's. Like the Seahawks 2015 defense. Stafford's 2014 defense was ranked 3rd in scoring, while Russell Wilson's 2015 defense was ranked 4th in scoring. A spot lower, which means I put a minus sign next to it. But look at Russell Wilson and Ben Roethlisberger again. I'm just really piling it on them in this video, aren't I? I have nothing against these quarterbacks except that the picture that has been painted is that these guys are just light years ahead of Stafford, but that is so far from reality. But they win so much more. Well, yeah, no they've won more. They've had better teams around them. But anyways, check this out. Take a look at these 2 seasons I've put up for Roethlisberger and Wilson. The defensive rankings are roughly the same. Wilson had a worse scoring defense by 1 spot, but had an immensely better running game. And even if you take out Wilson's rushing yards from 2015, the Seahawks would have still ranked 18th in rushing, which would have still ranked the Seahawks running game in 2015 higher than the Lions running game in 2014. Roethlisberger actually had a better scoring defense and a better running game. Stafford led the Lions to a better record despite having a much worse running game. The defense for the Seahawks was ranked 1 spot lower, but the 3rd or 18th ranked rushing offense, however you want to look at it, more than offsets being ranked 4th instead of 3rd. One other thing to note is that Wilson and Roethlisberger both had 5 Pro Bowlers on their team, and Stafford had 4, and he still led them to a better record in these particular seasons. And outside of those 2, look how he stacks up with Aaron Rodgers, Drew Brees, and Andrew Luck. He can lead his team to just as good of a record as elite quarterbacks if you give him a complete team. Now, Andrew Luck and Aaron Rodgers both had less Pro Bowlers on the team and led them to the same record as Stafford did. But I would have to think that having the 14th ranked running game and the 20th ranked running game both make up for not having as many Pro Bowls as Stafford did. So far in the series, we've seen that Stafford has had very little help on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball. It's not like I'm pulling it out of a hat either. I've shown the rankings of his defenses. I've shown that Stafford has had one 1,000-yard rusher, while Matt Ryan, Ben Roethlisberger, and Russell Wilson have all had 4. Even Rodgers has had more 1,000-yard rushers than Stafford. Every quarterback I've used in these videos so far has had far more Pro Bowlers and proven players than Stafford. And it's not like I've used below-average NFL quarterbacks to reference him to. I've been using quarterbacks who have all participated in the Pro Bowl, some of them even winning a Super Bowl, and these guys are viewed as top 10 and even top 5 quarterbacks. We've seen Stafford produce at an almost identical level to Matt Ryan and Ben Roethlisberger, despite not even having half as many offensive Pro Bowls on offense as either of them. And we've actually seen instances of him outproduce both of them with less. And this is the quarterback that we Lions fans want to get rid of? Do we still think Stafford's not good because he can't win without a good supporting cast? In this video, I showed you examples of Super Bowl winning quarterbacks not being able to win without a good running game, a good defense, or even both. We've seen actual and historical evidence of Cam Newton, or Roethlisberger, or Wilson. If those guys were playing in Stafford's teams, they wouldn't be getting talked about as some of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Wilson carried his team to 9-7 without a running game. Stafford carried his team to 9-7 without a running game or a defense. Stafford should be getting talked about as one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and should be getting talked about as one of the greatest players to ever put on a Lions uniform. But he might never be in that conversation if we can't get a complete team around him. Now, I also want to say, for the situations I brought up, I know there's plenty of instances where Stafford did not successfully get wins without a good supporting cast. And these whole situation comparisons isn't foolproof. Like, it's almost impossible to compare situation to situation. I'm trying to just show y'all that, it doesn't take into account strength of schedule, or there may be games where the defense played good, but the offense didn't play good, or games where the offense played amazing and the defense stunk it up. All I'm getting at is that you need a little help. And I've shown now that even Super Bowl winning quarterbacks have needed help in their careers. So the 2019 roster has the potential to be the most complete team Stafford has ever had, even over the 2014 season. And if everyone stays as healthy as possible, we know Stafford will make good utilization out of whatever he's got. You can't expect him to be throwing to third or fourth string tight ends and receivers and magically produce. I'm pretty convinced that if you gave the receivers and tight ends that Stafford was throwing to in the last 7 games of the 2018 season to pretty much any quarterback, they would have struggled to produce too. We saw Aaron Rodgers not even be able to produce this year, and it showed up in the final record. In 2013, when 2 of Tom Brady's top 5 targets were out of the league in 3 years, Tom Brady had the 5th lowest yards per pass attempt of his career and the 4th fewest touchdown passes of his career. They somehow miraculously went 12-4, but some of that credit has to go to their 10th ranked scoring defense. Well, I think that will be all for this episode. I hope you all enjoyed. If you haven't already, you might want to check out my other episodes I've got up on this topic if you are a Stafford supporter and need answers. I've got one called Stafford Doesn't Need the Best Supporting Cast. I've got one breaking down how Stafford makes players around him better. And I got one that's just like this episode, where it's comparing Stafford's offensive supporting cast to other quarterbacks. It was just like this episode, but talking about it on the offensive side of the ball. Yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Stay tuned for part 5. In part 5, I will be breaking down Stafford's clutchness. Thank you all again for watching.